Melissa, your mother and I decided the condo should go to you and the kids. My father raised his glass like he had just announced the most generous Christmas gift of his life. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. Then Melissa gasped, "Oh my God, Dad, are you serious?" She jumped up and hugged my mother while her husband started laughing and saying, "The kids are going to lose their minds. We can give them the second bedroom and turn the den into a playroom." Everyone around the table started congratulating them. I sat there holding my fork, staring at my parents. They weren't talking about some family property. They were talking about my condo. The $425,000 condo I had bought with my own money. I looked at my mother. "You gave Melissa my condo." She barely blinked. "You're single, Mineva. Melissa has a real family that needs the space." My father waved his hand, like the discussion was already over. "You can always buy another place." That was when I understood exactly what they had done. They hadn't asked me, because asking would have given me the chance to say no. Instead, they had announced it in front of everyone, expecting me to either surrender or become the selfish daughter who ruined Christmas. Melissa smiled at me. "We can start moving in right after Christmas, right?" Every face at that table turned toward me. So I put down my fork and started clapping. Slowly. My mother's smile faltered. Then I smiled too. "Wow," I said. "Merry Christmas, Melissa." Dad relaxed immediately. Mom did too. They thought I had folded. They had seen me keep the peace my whole life, and they assumed I would do it again. Under the table, I unlocked my phone. I scrolled to a name I had almost called 2 weeks earlier. Elena Brooks. My real estate agent. I typed one sentence. "Is your buyer still interested?" The reply came less than a minute later. "Very, are you finally ready?" Across from me, Melissa was already talking about where she would put the kids' beds. I looked at her, then at my parents, and typed back, "Yes, call me first thing tomorrow." The truth was, I had already been thinking about selling. A promotion I had accepted would require me to relocate to another state, but I had hesitated because that condo was the first major thing I had ever bought completely on my own. Selling it felt bigger than a financial decision. Until Christmas dinner. My parents had just made that decision frighteningly easy. Mineva. My mother followed me into the kitchen after dinner, while everyone else was still talking about Melissa. New home. She lowered her voice. "Don't make this difficult." I turned toward her. "You gave away my condo in front of the whole family, and I'm the one making things difficult." She sighed like I was proving her point. "Melissa and Daniel have 2 children. Their rent keeps going up. They need stability." Then, why didn't anyone ask me if I wanted to rent it to them, or sell it to them? Mom folded her arms. "Because we knew you'd make it complicated." There it was. The rule my family had lived by for years. Melissa needed help, so everyone rushed in. Rent money, childcare, emergency bills. I handled my own problems, so apparently that meant I needed nothing. And because I needed nothing, anything I had became easier for them to claim. I looked at Mom carefully. "Does Melissa know you don't own the condo?" Her expression hardened. "We're family. Stop talking like some lawyer." That answer bothered me. Not because it made sense, because she sounded so certain. For one uncomfortable second, I wondered whether my parents had told Melissa something I didn't know about the property. So I left without arguing. When I got home, I went straight to my desk. Deed. Mortgage payoff confirmation. Insurance. Purchase records. Every document said the same thing. Mineva Carter, sole owner. No parents. No shared interest. No hidden authority. Then I opened the email I had been avoiding for weeks. My promotion. New position, new state, better salary. I had already accepted it. The only thing I hadn't decided was what to do with the condo. I picked up my phone and called Alina. She answered on the second ring. Mineva. Is that buyer really still interested? Yes, they're pre-approved and they asked about your place again last week. I looked around the condo. Then I said the sentence my parents never expected me to say. Call them tomorrow, I'm selling. The next morning, while Melissa was measuring my bedrooms for furniture, I signed the paperwork to put the condo under contract. My phone started buzzing before breakfast. Melissa had created a family group chat called ***, New Home Plans. The first picture was a screenshot of a school route. The second was a sofa she wanted for the living room. Then came a message from her husband. Kids get the second bedroom. Den becomes the playroom. Mom replied with 3 heart emojis. Then she wrote, so happy we could help our daughter become a homeowner. Relatives started congratulating Melissa again. I watched the messages pile up without responding. Finally, Melissa tagged me. When are you getting the rest of your things out? I typed one word. Soon. She replied with a heart. She thought I had surrendered. Later that day, I drove to the condo and found Melissa, her husband, and Dad standing outside. Melissa was pointing toward the windows. I think our dining table will fit there. Dad saw me and held out his hand. Give Melissa your spare key so they can start bringing things over. No. His hand dropped. Mineva. I said no. His face tightened. Don't embarrass your sister after agreeing to this. I looked directly at him. I never agreed to give anyone anything. Melissa stopped smiling. What was all that clapping at Christmas then? Clapping. Her husband glanced between us. Melissa stepped closer. Mom and Dad already promised this place to my children. That sounds like something you should discuss with Mom and Dad. Dad cut in. We'll sort out the paperwork later. I stared at him. What paperwork? Silence. That was the moment I finally understood. There were no documents. No ownership papers. No legal arrangement. My parents had simply assumed that once they announced their decision publicly, I would be too embarrassed to refuse. I unlocked the front door. Everyone needs to leave. I have an appointment. Dad scoffed. What appointment could possibly be more important than fixing this? A car pulled into the parking area. Alina stepped out. Another vehicle arrived behind her. The buyer. Dad watched Alina walk toward us, then lightly caught my arm. Why is a realtor here? I removed his hand. Because unlike you, she actually has business involving this property. By the time Alina finished the walkthrough, my phone was exploding. Dad called twice. Mom sent 6 messages. Then Melissa started. You can't seriously be selling it. The buyer had already reviewed the condo before Christmas and was financed, so Alina told me the transaction could move quickly if everything stayed clean. That was exactly what I wanted. Mom called again. This time I answered. Stop the sale, she said immediately. Melissa already told the children they're moving. That wasn't my decision. Everyone in the family knows, Mineva. Do you understand how humiliating this will be? There it was again. Not is this yours? Not should we have asked. Just embarrassment. 2 days later, Melissa showed up while I was packing. What am I supposed to tell my kids? The truth. And where are we supposed to live? I stopped tapping the box. Melissa, you already have somewhere to live. She stared at me. You have a rental. Your lease isn't ending. Nobody is evicting you. Her expression changed. This had never been about saving Melissa from homelessness. My parents had simply decided she deserved an upgrade, and I should provide it. Dad called that evening. You're choosing money over your family. No, I said. I'm choosing who gets to make decisions about something I bought. Then I ended the call. The closing continued. I packed what I wanted for my new state and arranged for everything else to be removed. On December 30, Alina called. It's recorded, Mineva. I sat completely still. The condo belongs to the buyer now. Yes, it's done. I loaded my final boxes into the car and left town for my new position. Before I reached the highway, my phone vibrated. Mom. Then Dad. Melissa. Mom again. I turned on music and kept driving. Hours later, I reached my hotel, carried my bags inside, and finally looked at my screen. *92 missed calls. I didn't return any of the 92 calls that night. Instead, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and listened to the voicemails. The first few were angry. Mineva, call me immediately. Dad snapped in one. Mom's voice came next. You need to stop this sale before you do something you can't undo. Then the messages changed. Melissa had apparently arrived with boxes and discovered that there was nothing left to discuss. The condo had a new owner. By the final voicemail, Mom sounded frantic. How could you sell something we already gave to your sister? I actually stared at my phone. That sentence told me they still didn't understand. So the next evening, after I reached my new city, I answered their video call. Dad appeared first. Mom sat beside him. Melissa was there too. Dad didn't even say hello. How did you legally sell that condo without consulting us? Because I owned it. You know what I mean. No, Dad, I don't think you know what you mean. I pulled up the documents I had already checked after Christmas. I bought the condo. The deed was solely in my name. I paid the mortgage. Neither of you contributed toward the purchase. Neither of you had an ownership interest. Mom shook her head. But we had already promised it to Melissa. You can't give away something you don't own. Melissa looked toward Mom. Mom started to speak, but I continued. I had already accepted a promotion in another state. I was considering selling before Christmas. I hesitated because I loved that condo and wasn't sure I wanted to let it go. Dad frowned. So you planned this? No, you made the decision easy. Silence. There was no scheme against you, I said. You announced that my property belonged to Melissa because you assumed I'd be too uncomfortable to stop you. Melissa slowly turned toward our parents. You told me it was handled. Mom's face tightened. We thought Mineva would agree eventually. Melissa stared at her. You told my kids. We were trying to help you. With her house. Mom had no answer. For the first time since Christmas, Melissa wasn't looking at me like I had stolen something from her. She was looking at the people who had promised her something they never possessed. Dad leaned toward the camera. Do you understand how embarrassing you've made this for us? Everyone thinks. I didn't announce that condo as a gift, I interrupted. You did. He stopped. The buyer kept the condo. There was no lawsuit, no dramatic legal battle, because there was nothing for my parents to challenge. They had never owned a percentage of the property. Melissa and her family stayed in their rental. And when relatives learned what had actually happened, Mom and Dad's generous Christmas gesture suddenly looked very different. They hadn't offered Melissa $425,000 of their wealth. They had offered her mine. Then Mom suggested I could use some of the sale proceeds to help Melissa buy another place. No. That was the entire answer. The calls gradually stopped. Melissa eventually stopped asking about the condo after accepting that I had never promised it to her. My relationship with my parents changed permanently. I stopped discussing my salary with them. They didn't know how much I had in savings. They weren't consulted about my housing. And they would never again receive enough information about my finances to make plans with my money. I started my new position with the equity from the condo safely under my control. Months later, I rented a comfortable place near work while deciding where I wanted to buy next. One evening, I stood in the empty second bedroom looking out the window. Nobody else had a key. Nobody had decided who should sleep there. Nobody was measuring the room for furniture without asking me. For years, my parents had mistaken my willingness to keep the peace for permission. Christmas finally taught me the difference. They could make announcements. They could make promises. They could even convince an entire room that they had the authority to decide what happened to my property. But they couldn't make themselves owners. My parents gave away my $425,000 condo for Christmas. I gave them exactly what they actually owned, nothing.